Hey, welcome back! And today we're going to paint a Rhino. Now the Rhino is an awesome animal. I've been studying it for ages now, and today we're going to be putting it into this area here. Now there's a light switch, and there's also a door that slides. Now because of the surface of the door, I'm going to try and steer clear of that in the actual painting, so I'm going to put it here. But you'll notice I'll put the background in that basically now shows there's the water, and there's a bit of a background here where other rhinos will sit as well, just in the distance. But they're just started, they're just an idea. So I think the whole plan is going to work really nicely. So the rhino is going to sit right here, and what we're going to do is we're going to have a rhino sort of maybe sort of half its, half its kind of body coming down here like that. So the legs, you won't see them. And then what we're going to do is have the baby rhino sitting about here somewhere. So, and it's going to be on a platform, so it'll come down, overlook like a valley or a river or something. And it's going to have some beautiful perspective in it. So I think it's going to work well with the scene. It's going to add some more interest. You can see ones that I've already done just over here, where you've got, there's the leopard in the tree, there's a squirrel, there's actually a chameleon back here somewhere, you can see him in here. And then there's all these beautiful bromeliads and things. So these will all come into it later, into that one, but for now, let's get going! So we've done a basic sketch here, his ear and his horn. Just missed the light switch. I'm trying to get around that scenario because it's very difficult to paint over a difficult shape like that. But you can see there's his head, there's his ears, there's his mouth, his front leg here, and then there's the beginning of the baby. Just here, I think that's in good proportion. They're actually quite an interesting animal because their back goes all the way up and then all the way back down. I'm going to use that line as a focal point to bring the viewer's eye into the picture. So, and then his legs will sit about here, which is almost in line with, if you imagine, the base of the water line here. So this water will now have to somehow finish off at this door so that he and his little baby are actually on dry land, and then they can have something jut out, maybe a cliff face or something, or just something interesting like that. So I think we're ready to go. Okay, so you can see the basics of the rhino is in, and the little baby rhino here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start putting on some very basic kind of highlights, because the light's coming from this direction. So the sun will be pointing down here. So for example, his horn, I'm using a slightly smaller brush now, and just as I go through the process, I'm going to go smaller and smaller, but I think this horn is going to be a main point for focus. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how I make something look three-dimensional. So if you imagine you've got to get the colour something right. I'm just using Mars black, titanium white, and some raw umber, and it's giving me this sort of overall kind of brown tone. A little bit of black in there so that it sort of dulls it off. And these horns are not by any stretch of the imagination are they neat and tidy. They're actually, they ruffle them against all sorts of weird and wonderful things in the native forests and so on. So they're basically all chipped and broken. So I'll get to that in a minute, but for now I want to make it look smooth, because then I can make it look three-dimensional. So if the light's coming from this direction, this would suggest that this side here is in shadow. So I'm just going to use that darker tone just to indicate a little bit of shadow there. Not a great deal. And then I'm just going to make it slightly darker. Now you've got reflective light. So when you've got a surface, you've got reflective light on the side that the light is, and you've also got reflective light from the back of that light. So you've actually got a three-dimensional surface coming from this round object. Now if we then look at putting a highlight onto that point, it starts giving it some shape to the horn. Okay, then what I do is I just grab this brush is probably okay. It's like it's a wider style of filbert brush, and I just blend that in like that. Okay, then I'll come back to the highlight again. In this case, just some straight titanium white. I'm going to pick out some of these little details. There's a detail there, there's a detail there, there. And where the light would hit, it would create refractive light from that point. So then I just come back with my softening brush again and slowly build it up. I want to get rid of that complete pure white and just blend it into the colours. Okay. Now I just want to take that hard edge off. I'm going to use a mid-tone. Slightest bit of dark just on the edge of that horn there. There we go, that's it. Okay, and now I've got black. And that section of that horn there would actually be quite rounded. Okay, I'll blend that. That's starting to show a bit of shape now. Now I'll just grab some more titanium white and build up that point even more, that point even more, and I want that edge there to be quite white now, just to show a shape. Same with this horn. Okay. Now we'll just blend that black back in. It's looking more like it. Okay. I'm happy with that. I'm going to just start the face structure. The way I'm going to do that, he's got this lovely eye, beautiful eyes actually. I've studied the eyes in some detail. They've almost got an eyelid. They've got these weird sort of bags over the eye, and the whole face is actually respective of the eye. So the eye becomes a very major part of the whole scenario. So I'm going to use the same technique just to sort of try and create what looks like folds in the skin. I'll come back with a finer brush soon, but I've just got to get the way the light would effectively hit the eye structure. Now I want to put it's almost like I wouldn't say a bag under the eye, but where the eye would sit, it would actually cast a slight shadow. It's probably a little bit dark there. Going to change the colour slightly to a more of a sort of a browny tone, just to try and get the shapes into his face. I'm going to go over the darker tone. The way I do it is I actually use a brush that's got a slight amount of, in this case, titanium black on it, almost like a dry brush technique, and then blend in what I've got already over the top of what I've done. And that creates a nice shadow to a shape that would otherwise be quite flat. Okay, continuing on. So now I'm just putting some highlights on, just some lighter shades of the mix that I've made up, which is primarily titanium white and my Mars black with a touch of mid brown. So that's giving it a bit of texture, and it's also starting to show a few highlights. So for example, see this point here, if I want to make that come out, all I'll do is just touch it into the already wet paint and then blend it across, so it creates this lovely curve. And then I've noticed, see how that sort of jumps out now, and then all I need to do is put a tiniest touch of white on that point, and now he's got, I suppose you call it a upper eyebrow. But for the sake of the exercise, what you then do is, because it's so wrinkly, you go back with a slightly darker tone and just indicate very gently where those skin folds will fall. And then we've got this sort of three-dimensional head popping out. But what I'm going to do is I've actually worked out that this fellow, and indeed his little friend, I haven't started yet, only blocking in really, actually has other tones in it. We've got blue, we've got a brownish kind of ochre tone in the face, very mild, and we've also got his beautiful eye. Now if you want to see the most beautiful thing in the world, well, for this rhino anyway, you've got to study the eyes, because the eyes are awesome. Let me show you.
Just like I can wait.
Ta-da! Isn't that the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? That is a rhino's eye. And then we have the rhino's mouth. Now you'll see it's got blue, and there's also these beautiful kind of mauve tones just under his horn and things like that. And this is actually the gum and teeth structure of the mouth, so I've got to study that. And you can see that his horn is actually quite chipped and damaged. They've also got scratches across their nose where they rub against trees and so on. So I need to get that sort of information in it. And also see up here as well, you can see this sort of brownish sort of tone that they've got in the skin as well. So this is actually a white rhino. I'm actually painting a black rhino. Actually, they're black, grey, so forth. And the reason I'm doing this is because my 23-year-old daughter, who will come down and see this, loves rhinos, so we've got to capture that idea. So now what I'm just doing now is detailing the skin around the eye. You can see it's just showing a bit more of detail here in the eye. It's starting to create a bit more of the structure of the folds of the skin. So this piece here, what I'll do is I'll pick up a very slight what I'll do is I'll actually get a little bit of slightly darker colour and just draw that's a bit dark and very gently highlight each of those little folds so it looks like he's got this sort of skin that's, well, it's not wrinkly, but it's definitely got shape to it. It's not flat, and it folds all around, almost sort of holds the horn into the head because it comes out. You can see it around this area here. I want to make it look like the skin actually does fold out to the horn and then back in to the second horn, because it sort of shows a shape to it, and that shape flows across to this point here. And just by putting those slight little details in, you can start to see how the shape starts to form on the head. And all we're doing then is, if I look at the picture again, he's got all these tiny little folds around his eye. It's primarily around his eye that the folds. A lot of this area around the jaw is actually relatively smooth. And then as you come down towards these folds of skin here, it's like when I painted the T-Rex. You can look that one up. I painted a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and the Tyrannosaurus Rex has all these little bubbles on its skin, and it's I'm going to use a similar technique. They're not even, they kind of break. This stage here is only just done still in very basic house paint. I haven't used the artist paint yet, and then what I do is we'll go over this later on with oils just to detail it even more. But for now, this is just fleshing the structure in to sort of see where it sits. I think that's... I've changed the angle because I didn't like the angle of the picture. But yeah, it's coming along. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to detail the ears, and the ears need to show like they're actually sticking out of the head, and then the actual ear holes become channels. So this is the ear here, and if I just slowly and carefully detail around, it's got this beautiful curved shape to it. So if I just highlight that there, and then what actually happens is that folds in slightly thicker, and then this section here, just want to show, it's almost like it's torn. His ear is actually torn, which is quite interesting. Just flick that tiny little bit there, not too much, just enough that it gives that texture to it. And then over here is the same thing. So then if I just bring that back around, I want to change that colour slightly though, just a tiny bit of white in there, because you'd have a slightly more light coming from that angle. I don't want to have it too white, but something like that is fine. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a bit of dark. I'm just going to put a bit of brown in it as well. It's got a tiny bit of brown in it, and a slight, very, very small bit of cadmium red. They're almost like pig's ears. Have you ever studied a pig's ear? I study these weird things from time to time. And then I go there. Just want to get a tiny bit of pink in that ear. It's not like a pig's ear. I don't want to make it look like a pig's ear. The same token, it kind of is. There we go. That's it there. Yep, that's nice. Okay. And what I'm going to do is get a bit of dark. And then right where the ear hole is, effectively there, it's going to make that almost black. And then blend it. There we go. That's it. And then the same one with this one, except for the fact this point's slightly different. This be in line with it there. And then, yeah, and right on that point there, just for more interest than anything else, I'm just going to, it's got little tiny ruffles on his ears. Hardly see them, but they're there. I'm going to bring them out a bit. That's it. And there's his ear. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up all the little ruffles and folds that go along the head. I use a technique of basically dotting, and then I'll lick my finger and just that's him. Okay, and if I just do the same technique on all those bits, I want to keep those lovely differential, I suppose is the best term, angles, because they're not all even, but they do follow a pattern of some kind. So while it's still a bit wet, just kind of blend it a bit, and then here, same thing. There we go, it gives him some structure. Might just do a bit more over here. This time though, they actually go this way. And then they follow down. That's it. I'll keep going with that and follow it on from there. So this is a rhino's foot. It's pretty amazing, and now I'm going to paint it. So if I use a technique, once again, of trying to indicate where the muscle goes that holds the toe, similar technique to how I used to show where the muscle holds the horn, just by indicating slight gradations in the skin, I can then use the similar technique to show the folds of muscle which hold that toe in, simply by indicating these small areas of raised flesh. Also I can show the angle of the skin and how it follows, one could call it a pattern, but it's a random pattern. Now remember, of course, as it goes away from the light, things get darker, hence the pattern will also get darker. And at the same token, where that toe comes out here, it also would show depth, show it slightly darker into that point there. It's like a little raised section of the foot. Then all we're going to do is come back with a bit of white and highlight a few of those points across the top of the toe. And just use your finger there just to break up the pattern. Also, I've noticed as the foot turns around here, it's slightly darker, so those highlights would not be available. You wouldn't see anything like that. Also, you've got a bit of a fold in there. probably a little bit too much. Remember, as paint dries too, it gets darker, so we don't want to show too much dark at this time, because as it gets darker, it'll get even more pronounced. So we'll just lighten that a little bit there. Okay, then they've got a bit of a pattern going up the leg. And this darker section broken up there as well, just because we've got that pattern in there as well. And that shows a little bit more of the Rhino's features and structures by giving that bit of depth. I'm going to just make it a little bit darker under there, because there's this lip of skin that folds over the top. Maybe a little bit just in there as well, just to darken that a bit more. Yep. I'm wondering whether that leg's pronounced enough. I don't think it is. If I pronounce it even more, gives him a bit more shape to his ankle. He's a pretty shapely ankled creature. And then we've got this pattern there, goes in there. Almost like great big kind of patches of the skin which have been worn away. And you want to show those because it's got to be correct. It's coming along. Okay, so you can see that he's pretty well fleshed out now in acrylics. So I think I'm going to leave him at this stage because he's got his lights and his darks and his structure. Now I'm going to sort of concentrate on the little fellow, because then I don't have these sort of areas overlapping and so forth. So if I can basically get that side of the structure done, then I can come back and finish him off with oils. But I don't want to start getting too detailed with him yet, because otherwise he's going to feel a bit left out. So let's keep going.